Welcome to Stillspeakpod. Tonight's video is going to be an update on two recent stories that I brought to you. And we are going to be starting with Noah Claire and Amber Claire. So I was on Facebook today about noon or 1 o'clock when I saw an update from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the TBI, announcing that Noah and Amber Claire had been found safe and sound, and that Jay Claire was in custody. It was the best news of the day. It was amazing to see that. And attached to the post was a picture of Amber and Noah in the sand. Amber is looking down, but she had a smile on her face, and little Noah, being a 3-year-old little boy, is digging in the sand. It was the best news that we could possibly receive. And shortly after that, the family then confirmed the news even further, and it was just a joyous moment. It was just great. I even wrote on my Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram posts about it that it was a happy day. Like, wow, are you serious? Because when we heard that they were in Southern California area, possibly, at least they were on the 11th, I got completely concerned that they had crossed over to Mexico since it was so close by. So the fact that they were still in the area and found and safe was just a miracle. They were located not far from where the car had been towed away from, only about 5 miles, and they were on foot, and they did not have their backpacks that we saw in the pictures that I posted last night. And what happened was a local resident who heard about the story after finding out the car had been abandoned there was on her way to drop her son off at middle school and spotted them. And then 10 minutes later, after dropping her son off on her way back, she saw them again. So she pulled over, she parked the car, she contacted law enforcement. She did not approach them. She did not say anything to them. She stood away from them out of, concern that he may be armed or may flee. And she waited for authorities to arrive. And we've been told by the police that it was peaceful, that there was no altercation, there was no resisting, and Jake went, and cooperated. Which, let's face it, it's the least he can do, given the circumstances, right? I mean, after everything you've done, thank God you didn't cause a scene or have an altercation with police that was going to further traumatize these two children. The woman who spotted them said that, she wasn't totally sure it was them, but she called it in anyway. Thank God she listened to her gut, and you just never know, and it turns out she was right. The power of the public, folks. This is what I was talking about. You share, somebody else will share, and then someone else shares, and it gets to the person that we need it to get to. And then that person ends up being the hero of the story because they called it in and listened to their gut. So we had the TBI announcement, and then we had the family further confirming the news. Then we found out that it was a local resident who had spotted them. She actually had a picture that she had taken of them, what appears to be across the street. And then we got to see another picture where Noah is still in the sand digging, but he turns to the camera and gives a big, beautiful smile and a thumbs up. And it was just the best picture. I'm going to put it in this video to see him, and he's all smiling like he was in all his other pictures. Really just, brought a smile to my face. I was just so relieved for these families, and it was such a great outcome. This story started actually on the 5th But the way it went was, if you recall, Amanda, Noah's mother, dropped Noah off to Jake on the 5th, that Friday at 6 p.m. He then had his parents drive him and Noah to a parking lot where he then got into the car that was abandoned, the Subaru that he had purchased, and took off, and at some point picked up Amber. Now, that was unbeknownst to Amber's parents and to Amanda. The following morning, when Amber's family saw that she was missing and they found her letters, they contacted Amanda and said that Amber was gone and they believed that she could be with Jake. At that point, she got nervous and started to call Jake, and he was not responding to phone calls, texts, or social media contacts. And so Amanda immediately went to the police, but they were basically like, well, it's his time with Noah. There's not much we can do. And then on Sunday, when he was supposed to return him at 6 p.m., that was the 7th, they had police outside of Amanda's home waiting to see if he was going to show up with Noah and to see if Amber was with him. And of course, we now know that he did not show up to return him. So the story really began on the 5th. He knew when Amanda dropped Noah off what he was going to be doing next. She just had no idea. Immediately, they started to speak out. The family has been incredible at spreading the word and really getting people to engage and share. We now know that just a few days later, on the 11th, is when the car was abandoned in Southern California at an outlet mall. And it was towed away on the 13th, which was this past Saturday. It wasn't until the 16th that the family finally convinced the law enforcement to issue an Amber Alert for Noah, and they also upgraded his charges from custodial interference to kidnapping. I forget the exact wording of the charge. So that was really great news that day. It was like, oh my gosh, they finally got the Amber Alert. Yay. This is awesome. And it won't be long. They'll find them. And then not long after that, it was like, oh God, it just was horrible, because then because of that Amber Alert, they were able to track the license plate, and they found that this car had been towed on the 13th, and then they found out that the car had been there since the 11th, and now it was the 16th, so that meant that the car had been there for 5 days. It was so crushing, because it was like, well, where the hell are they now? And there's no way to track them with that car, and they have this 5-day head start, and they're near the Mexico border, and it was just horrible to see that. Very discouraging. The family felt completely crushed to see that this car had been towed. Then last night, the TBI released images from surveillance footage of the 3 walking at night on the 11th, which confirmed them being in that area in Southern California. In that picture, we see that they have large hiking backpacks. I posted it last night. You could see in the picture that Noah's hair had been cut and that Jake had shaved his beard. And that was sort of helpful, because we knew at least on the 11th, when that footage was taken, that they were safe. But now it was the 17th, so it was like, okay, well, that was 6 days ago. Are they still safe? It's been 6 days. And while it was absolutely crushing to the public and horrific for the family to find out that this car had been abandoned and towed, and that they possibly had this 5-day head start, in the end, it turned out that that was actually a really good thing that happened. Now, at the time, of course, it wasn't, but in hindsight, it was, because then they ended up staying in the area and were only about 5 miles away from those outlets when a local resident spotted them. So that's incredible, amazing, and a total miracle. Thankfully, this turned out to be, tomorrow will be 2 weeks of an ordeal, and I'm sure those 2 weeks feels like 2 years to the family, right? But what I'm going to say here is thank God it was only 2 weeks, and it wasn't 2 months, 2 years, or however freaking long Jake had in his mind that he was going to carry this out, which I would love to know if he shared his plan or is sharing his plan with detectives, because currently, as I'm recording this, he's still speaking with the detectives, and that is why we do not have a mugshot yet. We may have one as soon as I'm done recording this, which if we do, I will definitely put it in the video. And so he may be sharing that information. I'm just not sure if we'll ever know why he did it, or what his plan was, or how long he thought that he would actually be able to pull this off. I would also be very curious if he had any clue how much the story had blown up. I'm going to go with no, because they left behind their cell phones, and they were just out walking around in the morning, and were spotted. So I think they would have been a little bit more cautious if they actually knew how big the story had blown up. And hear me out here for a second, because I, for about 15 seconds, had a smidge of sympathy for Jake. I know, just 15 seconds, because I'm human, I'm a parent, and in my head I was imagining this scene where, the police arrive, they approach him, and he's put into handcuffs, the children are moved off to the side, and Jake in that moment probably looking at Noah, knowing that he was most likely never going to see his son again. And for that, I had a smidge of sympathy. But then I remembered the story, right? And what he has done here, and what he has done to his niece, and the trauma that he has caused, and the heartbreak and torment that he has done to these families, and my sympathy went out the window. That being said, was this all worth it? I mean, he could not have thought that he could do this long term. I just cannot fathom that he thought that. And if he thought that, well, you only got 2 weeks, bud. Was it worth it that you now lost your son? Because I'll be shocked if a judge actually gives this dude any sort of custody, even supervised custody. Okay? I'll be shocked after this. Which, judges have made some pretty bad calls. So, that's a possibility. But if I was his mother, I'd be fighting tooth and nails that he would not get to see his son for at least a very long time. Now, he does have charges, and he's most likely going to go to jail for a period of time. I'm not quite sure what his charges, sentences are. I need to look into that. But I'm talking after that. So was it worth it? Was this 2-week adventure worth it? What the hell were you thinking? So completely selfish. And I say that because now Noah is 3. He most likely has no idea what has just transpired. Kids are not aware of time. He probably thought he was just on an adventure with his father. I'm sure there was moments that he mentioned his mom, and possibly, his father said, "Oh, you'll see her soon." And he was just completely unaware, right? He sat in a car seat through the drive to California, and he just probably thought nothing of it. He doesn't understand adult type things. And the fact that Jake went peacefully, thank goodness, made this transition back to his mother a little less traumatic. If Jake had pulled a gun or resisted arrest, or they had to, physically take him down, that would have been horrific for Noah to have to witness. That being said, while this event may not have been severely traumatic to him, the long-term effects of it may be. Because if he does now lose his father and cannot see him, that could cause some, emotional, long-term damage. Now, some children grow up without their fathers, right? And he's young enough that he might not even remember this. And those children who grow up without a father grow up just fine. But what I'm saying is that could be a issue down the road, because some people are not okay without their father. So for Noah, time will tell what damage this has caused. That being said, what the mother went through for Noah was very traumatic, okay? As a mother, not knowing if you're ever going to see your child again, that this person that you made this child with is capable of doing this, not knowing what kind of state of mind he was in, which she has been through, has been horrendous. And she is going to be on guard, I would say, in the coming years with her son. And I don't blame her. I would trust basically no one with my child after an ordeal like this. Now, as far as Amber, that's a different story. Because, she's 16. And she does know what just happened. And she is aware of what she did before she left, as far as leaving the note, etc. And I said to you the other day that I don't even like speaking about Amber and Jake having inappropriate conversations. And I said that I hated talking about it, but I had to talk about it because it made the story more urgent. It was like, we have to discuss this because you need to understand that this is a really severe situation and we need to share and help for this family, okay? But I didn't like doing it. Why didn't I like doing it? Because in my head, I've been a 16-year-old girl before. And teens are brutal, okay? And our teen years are, in my opinion, the roughest years. You're figuring out who you are, right? And you're going through a lot of growth. And it's just a tough time. High school is tough. And my concern for Amber was if she was found safe and when she came home, and I even said this in my video, I was concerned about the fallout. And people now knowing that she was having this inappropriate conversation or relationship, we don't know the extent of it, with her own uncle. And I was worried about her friends, people she goes to school with, and so much more, right? I was very concerned about that because I was like, the fallout of that is going to be so terrible for this girl. I can't even imagine. And she most likely has no idea how much the story has blown up, but she's about to find out, and it's going to be probably pretty devastating to her to know the amount of people who knew that about her speaking with Jake in text messages. Not only that, but the letter that she wrote was shared. Now, I still don't know if the family gave permission for people to share the full letter. I do know that in their group, they shared the letter, but it was heavily redacted. And I told you the other night that a few YouTubers had disclosed the letter. They shared the letter, they read the letter, and when I saw it, I was like, I don't know if the family gave permission for this. And again, I was like, I don't want this girl's personal thoughts and letter that she addressed to her sister to be out in the public. I just didn't want that because, again, I was thinking, if she's found safe, could you imagine how she's going to feel knowing how many people read that letter? I mean, ugh. And it's private. It's private information and her private thoughts. So while it was already out there, For me, I didn't want to add to that. I didn't want to circulate it even more than it already had been. So for me, I chose not to read it to you. So now you have the 16-year-old girl who's very well aware of this event, so will be, affected by it, unlike possibly Noah, okay? Now, I'm assuming that Noah's not going to be affected by it, because I know 3-year-olds, they're pretty unaware of things like this, right? So she's going to be affected by this particular event, but long term, she's definitely going to be affected, and she most likely is going to need some therapy to get through this, to process her feelings and emotion, possibly some counseling with her family. It's going to be a pretty rocky, rough road for Amber. And that's terrible. I feel greatly for her. And, this is what I'm talking about as far as selfish. He wanted something and he did whatever he had to do to make that happen. And he did not think or consider what this was going to be doing to the 2 children that he took from their families. The torment and anguish that he caused. And for what? For what reason? Why would you do this? In 2021, you're not getting away with something like this, okay? Not with the power of social media. Because some of us were willing to keep going and sharing and talking and sharing and talking and sharing as long as it took to find those children and get them home. And he has just totally destroyed this 16-year-old girl's life. And she probably doesn't even realize it yet. It hasn't sunk in. She needs to be reunited with her family, and then she needs to go home. She needs to see what has happened in the time that she's been gone. And at that point is when she's going to need massive help through this ordeal. Now, I'm on the East Coast, and California is 3 hours behind me, and I think I saw the post between 12 and 1. So in California, it was roughly 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and Tennessee is an hour behind me, so 2 hours behind California. So they found out at probably about 11 o'clock in the morning, and somebody helped them to get flights out to California to be reunited with their children immediately. Like, they left to go to California within 5 hours of finding out that they had been found safe. And right before I started to record this, they actually had landed in Arizona for their layover, and we're almost to them. I've been refreshing over and over again over the last few hours, just waiting to see a picture or a video of them being reunited. I know that's a really personal moment, but we, the public, have been so invested in this that I just want to see that joyful moment where these families are reunited with their children. So I'm hoping they'll share at least a little clip. Now, I know that he's in custody and the children are at the police department, or at least it seems they are, waiting for them to arrive there. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, if I was Noah or Amber's mom, specifically Noah's mom, because he's 3 years old, and I walked into a building where I knew that man was at, I'd be like, let me at him. Just put me in a room with him so I could strangle him. Not really, but you know what I'm saying. I couldn't even imagine that feeling of just wanting to get your hands on him, just to be like, what the hell were you thinking? Now, I've said on my channel multiple times, I don't get emotionally attached to most stories, because I feel that to analyze a case and discuss a case, you need to be able to separate your emotion from the facts, because your emotions can get in the way and cloud how you're looking at a case. That being said, I'm a human, okay? And yeah, I'm thrilled when somebody is found safe. I'm very sad when somebody is not found. And I was just so elated to know that these children were safe. Because guys, really, 2 nights ago when we found out about them being near Southern California a few days ago, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. That's it. They're not going to find them. They're probably in Mexico. It's done. It was really discouraging, and I was very highly concerned that this was going to be dragging on for a long period of time. And kids grow so freaking fast that my concern there was like, well, a year, if this would have dragged on for a year, that would mean that this family lost a year of time with their children, and that would have just been terrible. And my other concern, and I expressed it on here, was that I wanted them to be found before Jake felt a high level of desperation, because when you feel that high level of desperation, you end up doing really horrific things and making a really bad decision. So the fact that they were found so quickly after knowing about the car being abandoned is just such a relief. And that desperation did not grow to a level that Jake felt the need to take a drastic action. I'm not sure that I'll be doing any more updates on this case unless we do get more information. I am just feeling relief, that they are okay. Now, in true crime, when you're following multiple different stories at one time, you get a day like today. So I started off the day feeling amazing. I was so happy and thrilled, etc., as I just expressed to you. And then this evening, boom, not so great news happened. Correction, terrible news happened. Breaking news about the case that I brought to you last night about two missing beautiful little sisters, 6 and 7 years old, Gianna Vicosa and Amina Vicosa. It was definitely not the update that I wanted to hear, and all that excitement got completely deflated out of me seeing the update. So now, just to remind you, last night they were taken by their father as well, and his name was Robert Vicosa, and it started on Sunday when he held his estranged wife captive and assaulted her, and then took his two girls by gunpoint and fled in a car that was owned by a relative of his friend and ex-coworker at the police force, Tia Bynum. Now, to backtrack here just a little bit, Robert was fired from the police force after spending 20 years with the Baltimore County Police Department in August. And then this happened the other day. And so this ex-coworker was somebody he worked with at the police force, like I just said. So he fled in his car, and the next day he crashed that car into what a resident referred to as a canal, and then broke into the camper of this resident who was out for a walk. And when she returned home, she saw Robert in a towel. He took her captive. He took her cell phone, her house phone, her clothing, and stole her Jetta. Once he left the home, he had the children with him. Once he left that home, he then left that car. And the victim had contacted the police through Facebook Messenger because she no longer had a phone, and told them about this man who came there with two little girls and that he took her cell phone and her car, etc. She obviously had no idea who this man was, but police immediately knew who it was due to the fact that the car was crashed outside this woman's camper, which was the car they believed he was in. So then they pinged her cell phone that he took, which led them to the car that he had taken and then abandoned. And inside the car was a medication bottle with his name on it, a backpack, her cell phone. And on her cell phone, he had called Tia Bynum, the ex-coworker and friend of his. And so at that point, they were, right before they found the Jetta, they were getting ready to issue an Amber Alert, but then they found the Jetta. So then they called that off. Well, Tia at one point had been taken in and questioned, and she was very evasive, police said, and at that point they actually suspended her from the police force. Once they saw that he used that second victim's phone to call Tia, they then went to Tia's home, and at that point they realized that she was gone, and now her car had been taken as well, or she had it with her. So they assumed that Tia was with Robert. Late yesterday, there was an armed carjacking reported, and it's alleged that Tia and Robert actually carjacked a man at gunpoint and forced him to drive them around before eventually letting him go. So it appears they abandoned then her Lexus and had carjacked this man to get his car from him. Again, you're dealing with two police officers, so they knew that they had to keep abandoning cars and cell phones so they couldn't be tracked. But it didn't work. Once this man contacted the police, they then had a car that they were looking for with that. And they spotted the car today, and it matched the description of what they believed he could be in. And it was traveling south on Ringgold Pike at the Maryland and Pennsylvania line. And on one side was the Pennsylvania police, and on the other side it was the Maryland police. The car started driving erratically, and then the vehicle ran off the road and into a fence line. Police then surrounded the vehicle. I know they were also following them with drones and helicopters. State troopers attempted to make contact with somebody in the car. A crisis negotiator tried to make another attempt at contacting them, but were unsuccessful. At some point, responders no longer could see inside of the car due to a thick layer of smoke inside. So at that point, they approached the car, they opened up the passenger side door, and they found a female driver in the front seat, which is believed to be Tia, and 3 passengers in the back seat, a man believed to be Robert, and 2 children in the back believed to be Gianna and Amina. They were all shot. The woman in the front seat, Tia, the man in the back seat, Robert, and 1 of the children were pronounced dead at the scene. The second child was transported to a medical center in Hagerstown, Maryland, where she was then pronounced deceased as well. This was not the update I was hoping to see. This is extremely tragic because this mother now lost both of her children. Absolutely heartbreaking, and I can't even fathom. Now, in court documents, it alleges that Tia was actually in on it with Robert when he went and assaulted his estranged wife. Allegedly, they plotted over the weekend to terrorize the estranged wife in her home. They drugged her, they tied her up, and they left her in the house for hours. And then they did this all in front of the children before taking off with the girls. So they ended up charging Tia Bynum with false imprisonment, and that's when she took off with Robert. And if this is true and she was there when he assaulted his estranged wife, this obviously explains why she was evasive with police when she was questioned. And at the time, she was an officer herself, because after being questioned, she was then suspended. So now if you think about it, the car went off the road. It was driving crazy and then went off the road. But then the car filled up with smoke. And so if you think about this, you have to wonder how this went down. Did Robert shoot Tia, possibly in the head from the back seat, which caused her to go off the road? And then at that point, did he, shoot the girls and then himself? We don't know. I guess it's possible that they, went off the road and were fine. And then when they were cornered by police on both sides, they knew they had no way out. And then something transpired in the car that caused the death of all four of them. I'm thinking, since the car went off the road and was driving all crazy right prior to that possibly Tia had been shot first, which caused the car to go off the road. And when that didn't harm all of them is when Robert ended up taking the life of Gianna and Amina and himself. Or possibly Tia and him were fighting, and that's why the car was driving crazy. Possibly she wanted to turn them in or turn herself in, and he was not going to let that happen. Now, when I brought you this story last night, I said that it was, similar to the Claire story because it was another father who had kidnapped his child, in this particular story, 2 children. But what I said to you was that it was different in the sense that with Jake, it seems like it was planned in advance by a few weeks, possibly a few months, whereas with this particular story, it appeared, at least, that it was on the spur of the moment type of situation. Now we're seeing in court documents that it does seem like there was sort of a plan to torment the estranged wife and to take the children, but that it was a very last minute type of plan, which then led into this crime spree and resulted in the death of 4 people, 2 of which were 2 innocent little children. And that was my concern in the Claire case, was that level of desperation that would make Jake do something really drastic. And it seems in the story where it was more planned out, it ended in a very safe result. In the story where it was last minute type of situation, which led into a crime spree, ended tragically. Now, with police being on both sides surrounding them, Robert could have felt that level of desperation that I was concerned about, where you feel like you have no way out, that you have no other choice, and that there's only one way to end it all. And these 2 innocent, beautiful little girls who just were starting their lives have lost their life. And for what? They were caught in the middle of their parents' separation and clearly their father's mental breakdown. And I would have to say that it probably started from him being fired from the police force back in August, and it just spiraled from there. And I hate to end on this negative note with this tragic update. I really am. The reason why I decided to do these updates in one video is because they were both major updates in 2 cases that were similar in the sense of kidnapping a child. And I just felt like I should just do it into one video. And I think it speaks to when you're following true crime cases, you're going to have highs and you're going to have low. Unfortunately, most stories do not have a happy ending. They don't. And some days you will have a day where you have wonderful news and terrible news. So my heart goes out to the mother of Gianna and Amina. I cannot even begin to fathom what it must feel like to lose both your children at the exact same time. And in this sort of way, shooting 2 little girls, I don't understand why. Why the children? Why? You want to kill yourself? Please, by all means, you're an adult. You can make that decision. But why the children? It's all so heartbreaking. And I said in my Murdoch series, it's one thing to be murdered. It's a whole other thing when you have to witness someone you love being murdered and then you're murdered. It's just, that's unfathomable. And in this situation, it does appear that at least one of the sisters had to witness the other being shot. Anyways, let's move on from that because it's just too horrible to even think about. I do want to do a video on Murda. It's been a while. If you've been following those videos, expect one the next day or so, maybe 2 days. And I've updated some of my videos about some of the missing people, if they've been found or not. Melissa Trumpy is still missing. There is no update. There has been no updates on Heidi Plank since we last spoke about that one. Brandon Blansett, he is also still missing. I also brought you the story out of Oklahoma. That sounded weird. Sorry about that. It's late. Oklahoma, about Dwayne Selby and his friend Jack Grimes and Dwayne's mother, Glenda Parton. And in that story, it was that Jack and Dwayne were together and they were heading to Texas for a horse show and went missing. Turns out they never even left their town. When Glenda, Dwayne's mom, came into town to look for her missing son, she then went missing. The car the men were traveling in was found locally, and Glenda's car was also found, but the three of them had not been found. Well, then about 2 weeks ago, Jack Grimes' remains were found in a wooded area. But since then, I've checked multiple times a day, every day, and there's not been a single update about Glenda or Dwayne being located. And it's still a total mystery on what has happened to Jack Grimes and where Dwayne and his mother, Glenda, are. Once I have information about that, I will be doing a video on it, because I think that story is just wild, and I'm very curious what has happened to these three people, and I think it's really sad that it has not received as much media attention as other cases, but that's just the way it goes. I apologize again for bringing you positive and negative news in one video, but you probably feel the way I felt today as these two stories developed. It just was like super, super high, yay, woo, and then super, super low. Oh my God, are you kidding me? 2 little girls shot to death. I mean, just an emotional day, just a crazy day. So I'm out for the evening, and until next time, I'll see you soon.